Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Liza. Thank you for sitting down with us today and talking to us about sustainability today on Earth Day and how it relates in our off-price world and the world of retail in general.
Thanks for having me, Audrey.
Yes.
I'm excited to talk shop.
Yes, always. It's so much fun
Always.
always talking to you. So for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the industry as a merchant and as a retailer?
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have more than an hour? No, I have about 20 years in merchandising, buying, planning, and product creation. So I spent that in industry working with design-led brands like Ralph Lauren and Club Monaco, and then department stores like Holt Renfrew, a few other stores across Canada and North America. And I've also spent a lot of time in Europe and London. So really understanding that a lot of us have the same challenges in terms of designers and product creators, that we just have so much product and we're doing things the same way. So that actually led me to start my consulting career. I spent some time with Accenture, and my 2 years of work at Accenture were spent with a brand that has a huge campus in Portland. I will not name names, but what we did
Wink,
was
wink.
we really changed the way we thought about sustainability from a product creation perspective and how that impacted the entire product life cycle. Mm-hmm. And I actually started my own consulting firm in 2020, because that's what you do in a global pandemic. You start your own business because we really felt like there weren't a lot of retailers in the consulting space who had done the work from, selling on the shop floor, which I've done. So I truly understand that customer journey all the way back to sourcing and product development and production. So we felt there was a real need for merchants and creators that could help retailers and brands and, folks like you truly push that sustainability factor forward and rethink the way we go to market.
Well, I know we immediately bonded when we connected on LinkedIn over our passion for sustainable fashion and just really kind of changing the narrative of how off-price fits into that model. And off-price, the roots of off-price are in sustainability and moving excess inventory and keeping it out of landfills. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm so excited to have this discussion with you and start changing the narrative.
Yeah, I think it's something that is critical right now, especially as we see just the lift in sales at off-price retailers. And I did pull up some stats, so I'll read those out right now.
Sure.
A few weeks ago, we heard about Ross and their fourth quarter sales. They were $5 billion. And their comp sales were up 9%. So what that tells you is that the narrative around off-price is super positive from a consumer perspective. And then as we keep talking about this, we'll talk about how it's so different from, the retailer's perspective and brand's perspective. TJX net sales were up 14% to $13.9 billion in the fourth quarter. And that was just a couple of years ago. I don't have the most current stats. I think those are coming out in the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. But even as we talk about Burlington's, their total sales increased 18% in the fourth quarter from 2 years ago. So sales were up 6%. And this is all according to Modern Retail. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more stats come up in the next week or so, actually, as we hear more about, what's happening this year in physical retail. But I definitely think that just tells you that consumers are gravitating towards the deals, right? And, I think we might have talked about this last week around inflation, because that's what everybody's talking about right now. Mm-hmm. And how does that impact the shopper journey and the consumer's perception of product when they're actually trying to now scale back and save, but then we're still seeing retail sales go up. So it's almost like, off-price actually could be a solution even for the consumer journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about off-price products, and a lot of times people have assumptions that they might all be out of date or irregulars or just lower quality that's been deemed undesirable by traditional retailers and consumers.
Yeah.
So in your perspective, is this an accurate depiction of the type of products that are available in the off-price market?
I mean, from a consumer perspective, I'd say absolutely not. I mean, a lot of, I definitely bought this plant like literally from a home goods store. So I will tell you that, not only the consumer perception has definitely shifted from that almost like a old school flea market type of model to, this is my destination where I'm going to find newness on a daily basis. And I will tell you that, a lot of my friends in that merchant space coming from TJX or Ross stores, they'll tell you that customers are shopping every day in some cases. And that is phenomenal, that outside of a grocery store that you're going into an apparel, footwear, accessories, home store almost on a daily basis, at a minimum weekly. So from a consumer perspective, I think that narrative has absolutely shifted. From a retailer's perspective, I'd say that, it's been a solution for many retailers as going through COVID with not only factory closures and goods coming in outside of the season, but with the supply chain chaos and what's happening right now from just a transit perspective. I'd say that there is a lot of opportunity for retailers to shift their goods that they can't sell in that season to off price so that they're not, it really does impact their bottom line from a gross margin perspective. So if they can make partnerships with off price retailers where their gross margin is not impacted as much as it would be if it's going to a liquidator or aged goods sitting in the back of their DC gathering dust, I'd say it's a pretty good solution.
Definitely. Well, and I think a big point, and it's obvious to us, that excess is at every point in the supply chain and at every level of the industry. So, well, maybe you can shed some more light on that. How does excess inventory play in to the supply chain, not just at the end consumer level, but throughout the entire process?
I mean, it really goes down to the traditional ways of buying and assorting product. When merchants and planners are assorting product, and I'd say this has been happening for the last 100 years. I don't know, definitely in my lifetime, right, of 20 in the industry. And even now is that when we're planning, starting with the line plan, which is basically your instructions for the season, you're actually already planning for excess. Because when you're working with factories, you are locked into these minimums. So even though you might only need 200 units of, let's say, a fashion t-shirt, you have to buy 500 because those are the minimum order quantities. Many times you cannot stray from that, and there'll be a ridiculous upcharge if you do. So better for the retailer or brand to, buy that, I guess, that minimum quantity. And then they can just plan, okay, what are we going to do with that product throughout our season? And for the most part, they're planning for markdowns, hoping the product will liquidate at, at 30 to 50% off at the end of season or even after season. But I will tell you that, from my experience is that we are sitting on years of aged goods, years, because either we don't want to send it to a liquidator because it'll devalue your brand. We don't know that off price is an option, or, the perception of off price is almost like a liquidator. Right. But the fact is, off price is not devaluing your brand. It's actually an outlet for your brand if you don't have an outlet already.
Definitely. Absolutely. And I think off price is a huge opportunity for any brand or retailer to get a taste of a new market or a new international market that is looking for these price points, might not be able to purchase your brand through traditional channels, but it's an opportunity to reach new markets and reach a customer base as well at the right price.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up such a great point, because they could possibly use off-price markets as a test market, not only to understand what customers are looking for in that space, but how price sensitive they are. And I think pricing is something that we're really starting to hear more about, especially as we hear what's happening in the subscription space, like what's happening, or even with Peloton and in the fitness space where they're raising their prices. Netflix, we were talking about that, I think yesterday or the day before. I spoke to Bloomberg about that, and there was a real big challenge that the entire industry is facing across verticals and categories, that as we raise prices, inflation goes up, gas is going up, there's a war that's impacting all parts of the supply chain. And then, of course, we're not out of COVID. So, if we're increasing those prices, those customers are going to stop buying. And that's the end of that, right? So how do we learn from different markets, different demographics, and of course, a vertical or channel like Offprice, on what is the customer willing to pay and what is the price that is most attractive for that customer in that region? I think there's a lot of insights you can capture.
Absolutely. And then the bonus of all that is you're keeping your product from the landfills, from the bottom of the ocean, as we've talked about. You're extending product life cycle. And that is a big value of ours at the Offprice show. We think giving these products a life to live on, because it's still quality product that consumers can use, and it doesn't have to go to waste. Yeah, that's just it, right? I mean, what we want to do is what's best for the environment, which is we want to buy less, we want to make less. But until we get to that point where we're changing the way we actually go to market in full price, that excess is always going to be there. Yeah. And it is a work in progress. A lot of brands are rethinking the way they go to market, the way they plan, using data and analytics to plan better. But in the meantime, I'd say that, we're going to live with excess for years and years. I mean, the fast fashion industry, look at what's happening with Shane and Boohoo and Pretty Young Little Things. I don't even know the name of that one. I'm too old for that one. But the fast fashion, we talk about that extensively on the impact to the environment, our water, our carbon footprint, as the human race. And it's sad, like when you hear about those facts. And so we're getting a lot of government publications, government leaderships across countries. Like, people are listening. And I think now that we have to hold retailers accountable, they are going to start shifting their ways. So, another thing that we discovered at Offprice when we were there was that there was a lot of in-season product. And that really speaks to the shifts in customer behavior. They have so many more options than they've ever had before. So how do you get access to product if you're planning a year ahead to product that is working in season for most retailers, but you don't have access to it because you don't have the time to spend a year developing product and buying product? That in-season planning is such a huge critical factor in the customer journey and how we need to change the way we plan product, where we're not planning a year ahead. And we should leave a lot more room in our open to buys as merchants and planners to buy in season. And that was one thing I saw an abundance of, which actually made me super happy. Yeah, and that's become a huge part of our show, in addition to the brand name closeouts and aftermarket, secondary market goods, that the private label or the current in-season lines have become a big part. And I think the value that these brands and apparel lines have that we see at our show is they've cut out a lot of the fluff. They don't spend a lot of money on marketing their brand and D2C and going online with fancy showrooms and all that. They're focusing on getting the product to the consumer quickly, and it's a more streamlined approach. And I think that adds a lot of value for mid-sized retailers, people who don't necessarily have, like you said, the bandwidth to invest in product development. But these are great partners for you who are experts in that product development and focus on, streamlining the process.
Yeah, and I have to say that was the part that was most delightful for me, because what we learned as retailers during the pandemic, I mean, not that we're out of it, but the last 2 years at least, was that it was very difficult to get product because product was so far away.
Yeah.
And it was stuck at ports, and it was stuck on ships or in the Suez Canal, or, wherever it was stuck. So you couldn't get at it. But if you have vendors that have inventory today and you've sold out of your core denim and you need to replace that right away, I mean, I would say that most retailers would jump at that.
Yeah.
If they knew it existed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the kicker, right?
Yeah.
And we realize that off-price is not going to be 100% of most retailers' business model. Of course, there is the major retailers who are doing that, but it can be 10 to 15% of any retailer's business model, in our opinion. Yeah. If you're conscious to save that in season open to buy, and you're planning for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say that, just seeing how Macy's has expanded their Backstage and how they're going to roll that out across stores, that is super interesting, because it's telling you that mainstream full price retail is not only testing the market of off price, but they're going all in.
Yeah.
And in fact, those Backstage stores are shop in shops in a full price store. So imagine the opportunity that a full price retailer has to not only extend the product life cycle, which is extremely sustainable, but possibly even include circularity in that journey, where they could, customers could return products, and it could actually be part of a private label journey. Like, there's a lot of different ways we could look at this from a retailer and brand perspective that, I don't think we've ever actually talked about before or thought about before as a full price retailer.
Yeah. And there's a lot of innovation recently. I mean, this is a great segue into the resale market and that topic. And that is something we're also seeing being introduced at our show, and full price retailers, people you would have never expected, like Target, going into resale market. So let us know, how does this play in to everything?
Well, the way that I look at resale is from a luxury standpoint and also from a mainstream standpoint. So when we look at Poshmark and ThredUp and Real, and then of course there's so many other retailers and brands that are looking at resale as part of their model now. And then thinking about it from that luxury standpoint and consignment, and all the things that go with, your beautiful vintage handbag or coat or designer piece, all that is part of the resale market. And luxury already has a sustainability factor because of the product life cycle and how long it lasts. I mean, I have handbags that my mom has passed down to me. I mean, she's not dead or anything. I basically stole them from her because I'm like, these are fabulous. So
right.
So, there is something to be said about the product life cycle and how long it lasts from a luxury standpoint, because luxury is the reason it's luxury. It's because a lot of it is handmade and a lot of it has used the best materials, the best even biodegradable materials, right? If it's leather or any of those type of materials. So there's a lot less, I call them petroleum-based synthetic fabrics that are bad for the environment to begin with, let alone how they were produced and constructed within a garment or accessory or footwear. Resale luxury just brings a whole other conversation to life for any retailer. And you'll find a lot of full price retailers have a little section for luxury resale. Yeah. So I'd say there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah. And we're seeing it more and more, even small boutiques introducing it, starting small and growing. But another thing I think is interesting with the Gen Z that's coming up and the platforms that they're shopping on is that it's not only luxury products now. If you look at Depop, they have, fast fashion products that teenagers and young adults are reselling, and that's just amazing to me. But I think it speaks to that shift in consumer demand and the value in extending any product's life cycle. High value or low value products too.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up the younger generation. And I would say that those values around sustainability and circularity, and of course the product life cycle, are so apparent, I would say, with a lot of the folks that I've talked to, and of course, my friends' kids. And I would say that it's almost not even an untapped market, but it's a market that a lot of retailers should be taking very, very seriously.
Absolutely.
Because they're not only buying luxury, like you said, they're actually buying fast fashion. They're buying all price points. But the fact is, they're doing it because it aligns with their own personal sustainability values. And of course, price point. I mean, when we think about price point, they don't have a lot of disposable income, like, if 30, 40 plus. So when we think about disposable income, we think about, trading, bartering and things like that. I think that's also going to come into play in some of these resale tech solutions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've touched on a lot today. I think some of the big takeaways for me are just there's so many different strategies in the off-price world that retailers at all levels can use. And I think you shed a really great light on that for us and starting this conversation that not a lot of people are talking about yet.
Yeah. And I think, the one thing to always go back to, no matter what vertical, channel, what price point you're selling at, it is truly about the customer and what they're looking for. And how do we meet them where they're hanging out, where they're shopping, where they're engaging with a brand. And a lot of those times, it is the weekly visits to a TJX or, any store that sells brands for less, let's call it. I will tell you that, everyone I know pretty much shops at an off-price store.
Right.
I don't think I know anybody that doesn't.
Right.
And that tells a lot, because imagine just me personally, my community of, this global network, and every single person I know, I'm pretty sure shops at an off-price store. Yeah. And that tells you a lot right there.
Definitely. I mean, even us who are in the industry, we're still consumers at the end of the day. And clearly the mind shift has shifted on the consumer side. So I think as industry, it should start to shift as well.
Absolutely. It's a treasure hunt, right?
For sure. Always has been, always will be.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Liza. This has been such an eye-opening conversation, and I hope some people can take some lessons and try some new strategies when they start planning for next year.
I think they will. I think that we ruffled some feathers, hopefully, today. I think that education and just like learning about what options are available is critical in retail today, and this is definitely a solution that we need to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much again, Liza, for joining us. And if anybody wants to connect with you, can you tell us where they can find you?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me at themerchantlife.com, which is where I put out a lot of retail content, a lot of tips and tricks. So definitely sign up for the newsletter, and across social at The Merchant Life.
Awesome. Thanks again, Liza. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.